After the battle at Agincourt, when the English are victorious, then the question becomes, so what does England get as a result of its victory? And one of the things King Henry V wants is the hand of Catherine, the French princess. He wants her as a wife. And so he, at the end of the play, then Henry V is wooing Catherine, and he wants to win her over. And at the bottom of that first section there, Henry V refers to his love suit to Catherine's gentle heart. Catherine, as we've seen in a different video, is working on her English, but she's not yet proficient. And so she says, Your Majesty shall mock at me, I cannot speak your England. In other words, I can't speak English. And Henry V responds, O fair Catherine, if you will love me soundly with your French heart, I will be glad to hear you confess it brokenly with your English tongue. Do you like me, Kate? And Catherine responds, Pardonnez-moi, pardon me, I cannot tell what is like me. In other words, what does like me mean? And then Henry V plays on that a bit and says, an angel is like you, Kate, and you are like an angel. The theme is of a conquering army now on the territory of the conquered adversary. And then, before too much time pass, members of the conquered army begin to pair off with members of the conquered people. Members of the conquering army begin to pair off with members of the conquered people. And so we see that here in the case of Henry V wanting to pair off with Catherine. This photo comes to us from a private photo album from the Pacific War. And what it shows is a group of American soldiers surrounding a dead Japanese soldier. It's a photo, I've seen photos like this a number of times from the Pacific War. I've never seen any photos like this from the war the United States fought against Germany in North Africa and Europe. The war of the United States against Japan in the Second World War was a particularly bitter war, sometimes referred to as a war without mercy. And I think that helps explain then why photos like this are fairly common, because if you look at the language of at least some of the soldiers around that dead Japanese soldier, the photo does have very much the quality of sort of a trophy shot, a trophy photo, the body language of that man in the middle. The Japanese were a ferocious and devoted adversary, and they took a tremendous toll on American forces. But the American forces overwhelmed the Japanese forces, and Japan, waves the white flag in August 1945, signs the final surrender documents in September 1945. And it's not long then before American occupation forces set up shop in Japan. And here we see an early photo. And in fact, deep into the 21st century, American forces maintain military bases in Japan. What's interesting is that this theme that we see in Henry V, we see it play out in Germany. American soldiers, American airmen begin to pair off with German women. And in Japan, American sailors, American airmen, American soldiers, American Marines begin to pair off with Japanese women. These photos I'm going to show you come then from the same photo album. And so here we have a photo that symbolizes the victorious Americans now in the land of the conquered people, in the land of the defeated people in Japan. The photo album includes photos of war damage. You see that damage building there. The damage here might be a little harder to see, but it's out there, right? And so another photo of battle damage from the war. Here in the bottom left is a photo of a Japanese boy who's so thin you can see, the chest bones. He's so thin, and behind him is destruction from the war. And so that's not surprising that in the photo album of a soldier who very early is in Japan as part of the occupying army, I suppose it's not surprising that he would take photographs of war destruction. And then we have photos that clearly indicate who's in charge. You have this Japanese man here who certainly knows Japanese who did not survive the war. Japan took such tremendous casualties during this war. It would be very, very difficult to believe that every Japanese, over the age of 3 or 4 is going to know someone, probably multiple Japanese who did not survive the war. And here we have this American soldier here who is in this bicycle taxi, and it's pretty obvious who's in charge. It's pretty obvious who's in command. And not only is this soldier in command as a customer, but he's in command as a representative of the American military. This photo, I think, sends the same message. We know who's in charge. And even if there's no feeling of hostility between the worker and the American soldier who's actually being taken around, who's actually being transported, even if there's no tension between them, it's pretty clear who's in charge. We know who won the war. And so we see those kinds of photos. But then we see other photos that get at the theme of the video today. And you notice that the fellow in the top left there has his arm around that young woman there, that young Japanese woman. We can't be sure how to interpret that photo, right? I mean, perhaps this is just a mark of friendship. Every one of those women surely knows 1 to multiple Japanese who did not survive the war. And here they are taking a photo with American soldiers. Not only that, but one of the American soldiers has his arm around that Japanese woman. We have this photograph in the album of 3 Japanese young women. And then we have multiple photographs like this, which indicate not only friendliness, but indicate a degree of romance. And here's the theme. And it's an interesting psychological thing, I think, especially thinking of it from the Japanese woman's point of view. Because again, that Japanese woman, surely she knows people, probably multiple people who did not survive the war. Japanese soldiers, Japanese sailors, right? But then also civilians who may have been killed in bombing raids. And here, a representative of the conquering army, of the victorious army, has his arms around her in a way that obviously conveys something of closeness, right? Same thing here. Same thing here. So it's an interesting theme that I'm not equipped really to discuss in any detail. And I'm thinking of it especially from the point of view of the Japanese. Suppose this young Japanese woman brings this guy home. What do her parents think? What do her neighbors think? What is she herself thinking as she's pairing off with this representative of the victorious former enemy? And, not former a long time ago, but former recently. Rules were put in place, no fraternization among American military service personnel and German women, no fraternization among American military personnel and Japanese women. But nature takes its course, and in that respect, it's easy to understand. But there is that other thing of the pairing off with the person who represents that victorious army that defeated my country. It might be an interesting topic to dig into perhaps in a psychology class. But when I read that passage in Henry V, of course with Henry V, with Catherine, here you have royalty and that kind of old-fashioned thing that's going on. So that's different, but still there's that element of romance, between the recent adversaries or the people who represent the recent adversaries. It's an interesting psychological phenomenon.